Welcome to Amusing Minds Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Jay Sparks with us, and we're going to talk about brainstorming. Have you ever felt like you've run into a brick wall and you needed something to get you out of that block? And I think brainstorming is one of the ways that we can do that. Have you guys ever run into an issue with coming up with an idea? How do you overcome that? What is brainstorming to you?
Rodney.
No, I'm perfect.
Rodney, tell me your secrets. Tell me your secrets to perfection.
I think when it goes to, ideas, there's definitely a lot of time where I got a really cool idea and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna make a video game. And then I realize I don't know how to program as well as I'd like to. Or I'm like, ooh, I'm going to draw a dope picture, and I'll start drawing it, and I'm like, oh my god, this is going to take weeks. So, do I ever run into brick walls? All the time. But also, I like to think that there's a lot of projects that I've gotten into and I've worked on, and I've developed the ideas and worked them through from start to finish. So, I think most people run into brick walls. I don't know, Larry?
All the time. I try to work on voice acting stuff a lot, so it comes down to trying to imagine what the directors and producers actually want. Because, you know, most of the time you generally get a good idea, but unless you're actually talking to them in like a brainstorming session, you're just kind of left to your own devices. And there's some producers and directors out there that love that kind of thing. They're like, well, I want to see what you come up with. I don't want to just hand you the formula. Like, say, hey, this is how this is how you get to where you need to be. Some people, they just need to kind of be guided in the right direction, like a little kickstart or something, And so, for me, there's a lot of times when it comes down to like, ooh, is this what they want? Is there something I could have done better?
For me, running into some sort of creative block does happen, and I think it happens to anybody. We're trying to be creative, and we just, the ideas stop flowing, or we're not feeling it, or we're not motivated, or whatever the reasoning is, but we run into that block, and we feel like it's just, we can't overcome it. And for me, the easiest way that I've been able to overcome some kind of creative block is to just share that with somebody else and see if they have an idea, and just present to them, here's where I'm stuck, and I have no ideas, and just try to get some feedback from somebody you trust or somebody completely random. But if you can get to talking about it, and me, I'm more of a social person, so it's easy for me to go, hey, what do you think of this? And I feed off of that. I get that energy from interacting with other people and knowing that they have even the slightest vague interest in what I'm talking about. It feeds my soul, and I can get past that block. For you guys, what are some of the methods that, or no, that's not what I ask. For you guys, what do you think brainstorming is? Like, what's your personal take on brainstorming? Not worrying about official definition. What is it for you? What does it look like, or what does it feel like?
I think for me, brainstorming, it is in its definition, essentially the process of constructing an idea or creating something in the brain or in the mental space so that you can later execute on it. Brainstorming is the time at which you allow yourself to dream as big as possible and wide as possible to try to come up with something that you can create. It's the creative process before the creation.
What does that look like for you, though? Like, what happens when you sit down to brainstorm?
I take a more active brainstorming approach. So a lot of the things I create usually have some kind of tangible aspect to them. So, say I'm making a board game. When I'm in the process of making a board game, I have a baseline idea, And then I'm like, okay, cool. Let's pen on paper. Let's go. All right. We made some cards. All right. How does it work? Let's play with them. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, that did work. All right. Let's make some new cards. Let's try that. Let's get rid of this. Like, it's a very active process, but I never tell myself in the early stages, it has to be this way. I go, here's a general idea. Let's try to achieve that. And then I build on that.
Where are you at with this, Lane?
So for me, it's kind of I don't know how to place it into its own kind of core set. For me, it's talking, just audio to ear conversation, where I feel, for at least me, it allows me to kind of like go into my own headspace and imagine, and then, you know, kind of coming to this point and saying, hey, look, here's our final product. How in the heck would we even get there? And then you're sitting there and you're slowly kind of weaving this actual thread, this rope, to kind of hold together your idea and reality and actually make it something true. So that's kind of what I go for. I like to talk it out and then figure out where we need to go.
For me, my brainstorming happens, at first it starts visually, and then it becomes just a bunch of text, usually. And it does depend on what I'm trying to create as far as an idea. If it's more abstract, like a project, like a podcast or a script or a story, that usually starts out in text, sometimes with some visual additions. But if I'm designing a product, it all starts visually. I go searching for images to try and get inspiration, and then I open up Illustrator and try to lay out some templates, and then I run those templates and I see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I make adjustments and then keep going at that evolution until I get to a point where I feel like I've made something, and going through that type of process. So shouldn't really end a statement with so. That's
moving on.
So that's all I have to say about that. So I think this is a good time to talk about our guest today a little bit. Jay Sparks is local to mid-Missouri, and he works at a place that supports entrepreneurs. So he is doing brainstorming like every day to help people get business ideas off the ground. He's been a game designer for as long as I've known him, mostly tabletop games, and I know there's brainstorming involved in that. And then he's also an illustrator and a writer. He's also done radio in the past, so he's a pretty well-rounded guy. He was also a bartender for a long time, and that I'm sure had brought a lot of interesting conversations about random ideas into his place of work. So I think we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Jay Sparks. Stick around for more podcasts after this. Welcome back to Amusing Minds podcast. We have our guest with us now, Jay Sparks. Hi, Jay. How's it going?
Good, y'all. How are you guys doing?
Not too shabby.
Yeah.
We've been talking a little bit about brainstorming, and from what I understand, brainstorming is not just part of what you do in so many of your creative projects, but also a little bit of what you do for a living. Can you tell us a little bit about just what you do on the daily that really applies to brainstorming and kind of helping people figure out, how to brainstorm something?
Sure. Full disclosure, I was a bartender for 20 years, so my brain had an awful lot of time to just spin its wheels amidst all of that social kind of background noise. But just recently, I decided in my mid-40s to go ahead and get, an adult job. So I have my first desk and first office ever, and I am the entrepreneurship coordinator for a 501c3 that works with our local city government here to assist small businesses and solopreneurs and entrepreneurs getting businesses started. So I get to play pretend every day because people come to me with business ideas and they're like, let's do equestrian. And I'm like, I think they eat hay. So let's do it. Let's figure out how we can get you a business started, even though I know absolutely nothing about that whatsoever.
That's really cool. Yeah, so supporting entrepreneurship is so awesome and important,
especially in this day and age.
Oh yes.
Good Lord.
Yeah. What just bouncing off the entrepreneurship thing, because it's a question that popped into my head. What is the weirdest job idea or that you've had come into your office? What was like the thing that threw you off, but you were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's try it anyway. You mentioned horses, but what's the weirdest one?
I've got a client coming up that we're going to intake as a client at our where we do our co-working and everything with the entrepreneurs who wants to start a non-alcoholic bar. Not a coffee shop, not a juice bar necessarily, but actual like mixology with shrubs and fermented juices and things and the whole, whatever, but a bar atmosphere that's non-alcoholic. And at first, I mean, as a 20-year bartender, I had to stifle the laugh. I had to kind of like catch myself. And as I hung up the phone from our initial kind of talk, I started doing some research and I was like, wow, these are actually kind of fascinating. Like there's an actual culture of these kind of teetotaler, no alcohol allowed, but for people who still want the bar atmosphere, kind of around the country and around the world. And it's actually really fascinating. I have no idea if it's going to work here. I have no idea what kind of, resources they're bringing to the table yet, but I'm in now. And originally at first blush, I was nowhere near feeling like I was in on that.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I would say that's a little out there. I've never heard of it, but that does sound pretty cool. I think I would check out a place like that. Even though I do enjoy the alcohol, I would check it out just to see if they have anything that tastes interesting, because then I could like sample so many different things and not end up passed out on the floor.
Or not feeling flushed in the face and then walking around saying, I think I might be drunk.
I don't think that happens for me. I think it just goes from, oh, this is I'm feeling kind of tipsy to just completely passed out and sick. I mean, you guys know how much of a lightweight I am.
You get chatty, and then all of a sudden you find that one friend who's just there, and you're like, hey, like your face. It's nice.
I'm gonna have to second Larry's
you become like a social diva. You're like, hey, hi, and you're like, what? You're like, I don't know.
It's good times.
Hey, I can't help that I'm just full of love for people, okay? And alcohol brings that out a little bit more.
Alcohol leaves the door open is what it is, and you're like, hey, no, stop. Not like this.
All my love for people just comes pouring out of my head.
Jay, I want to dig into this a little bit more. I'm curious about this because like I've heard of like programs that help entrepreneurs and such. But like, how much are you involved in that process? Like, is it like, do you help them find how to make logos or how to develop the business plan? Like, what all is that entailed?
We have a ton of resource partners. The catchphrase is the ecosystem is what entrepreneurs like to call their area that they work in. And so in our ecosystem here, we have a ton of resource partners. We can definitely take from the back of the cocktail napkin all the way through second round of venture capital funding. We can do it all. The only thing we can't do is write a check. We don't have, I tell people this all the time, we don't have the Scrooge McDuck vault that we get to go swim in and hand you bags of gold coins. I can't do that part, but we can do everything else. We can help with EIN numbers, incorporating, legal help, logos and branding, marketing. We do one-on-one counseling. That's a big part of what we do. Is once a month we have at least like 30 minutes to an hour with every client where we buckle down and set some benchmarks and milestones and make sure they're making measurable progress. It's a really cool, fun system that really assists people in that situation. It's so wide ranging. I mean, sometimes from one meeting to the next, the reframe that has to happen in your brain as kind of the coordinator of that is crazy, because you might be going from like I said, back of the cocktail napkin, I have this dream and nothing, to, okay, we're meeting with such and such venture capital next week and we need to redo our pitch deck and we need to do that in like 30 minutes later. And so there's quite a wide range of that stuff.
Awesome. Yeah.
What would you say is the, sorry, Rodney. What would you say?
No, I was done.
Oh, okay. What would you say is probably the most interesting thing you've learned from starting this career path towards this, making the ideas come true?
The thing for me, and this is, I think this will hopefully be a nice little segue into brainstorming here, is that, and it's something that I think everyone who gets involved in entrepreneurship outside of just doing it, but when you work in entrepreneurship and not on entrepreneurship, the one thing that you hear bandied about is that everyone's making it up as you go along. There literally is no blueprint. There is no right way to do things. And when you learn that the first 7 times you hear it and learn it, you'll be like, no, there's successful people who know what they're doing, except, yeah, they're making it up too. So it's that. And to tie in with that, people don't know what they don't know. And so you might have an entrepreneur who's on step 47, but they just didn't know that they skipped steps 12, 13, and 14. They just don't know it. And it's causing them a whole bunch of problems at step 47. But if they don't know what they don't know, you have to be the one to be like, okay, let's go back to step 12 and let's see why we skipped this and what's going on. And those two things in tandem, just it's crazy how much of it is literally just trying on new hats and playing pretend and trying to talk about kind of first principles and that kind of thing.
So I actually have like another question. It's something that pertains recently. So I have a kiddo, and I'm trying to teach them not to be scared to try things, right? Not to attempt certain things. I imagine that when people are trying to start these new businesses and they're going to work with you guys, that a very similar mindset might come up where they're scared to try things, or on the inverse, they're not scared to try certain things. Do you guys help with that? Do you address that at all? Like, I don't know.
Oh, very, very much so. Listen, entrepreneurship is all slogans, and I've realized that the business world is all just bumper sticker slogans. Like how do you get going every day, and like how do you motivate people? It's these bumper sticker slogans. So for this side of things, for what you're doing, there's 2 that we use all the time. One is version 1 is better than version none, and you can doodle and draw and plan and write and spreadsheet yourself to death, but until you make version 1 and put it out there to someone else, it doesn't matter. It literally, you can't ever make it better out of your head until you get it in version 1 and get it out there to people. And then to go along with that is start small, fail faster. And it's really interesting to sit and have these great business conversations where you're telling people to fail, but until you fail a bunch, you're not going to make it any better. You're not going to figure out where your pivot is. And so, yes, very much so. We address those things head on, and you just have to tell people to get out of their own head, and then let them know that as they're out of their own head, they're going to fail a bunch of times. So they're going to go back in their own head, and then you have to pull them out again, and they're going to fail again. Like it's just this constant work you do with entrepreneurs, unless you meet someone like you said who's just 1,000 miles an hour, and that happens on occasion too. In which case, it's more about like, whoa, slow down. We got to get to those points, and we'll get there. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like a couple little kind of made up rules for getting people motivated and keeping them on track to keep trying and keep doing new things, and that makes me think about brainstorming. And I'd like for you, Jay, to make up something for us. Could you make up a couple rules about brainstorming? What would some rules around brainstorming be if somebody asked you, how do I brainstorm, or how do I get started with that? What's the basic things that I need to know to start this process called brainstorming?
Well, I think there's the conventional wisdom of brainstorming, right? There's things like the more ideas, the better. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Many heads are better than one. There's a lot of conventional things that people have heard about or kind of free associate with brainstorming. And the thing I've been working on most closely, and I'm not quite done with it yet, but it's something I'm working on in order to maybe do some programming and presenting on it as far as brainstorming goes. I'm using Bloom's taxonomy, and I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's how people learn. It was kind of an older educational theory about how children, especially, but how humans learn, and the steps that you go through as you're learning at more advanced levels. And it sounds like a weird thing, but applying that to a brainstorming session really it really dives into the brainstorming session. Kind of evolves almost like a human brain evolves. And so you work through steps of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Those are the steps of Bloom's taxonomy. And I think that you'll see that brainstorming works in a lot of those same ways, step by step. So a lot of things about brainstorming aren't necessarily wrong, but there's better ways to work through them.
Interesting. Yeah, so everything you know about brainstorming is wrong, but not wrong.
Yeah.
And here, so it's like, so brainstorming, when somebody says their idea is like their baby or their child, it's quite a good analogy. Like, you have to teach it and watch it grow or watch it evolve and become more of an organic thing, and some of that conventional wisdom like almost touches that, but not quite. And what you were saying is such a much more precise way of taking an approach to an idea. So if you want to get to that process, how do we come up with new ideas? And this is a question for everybody. How do you put yourself in a place, or how do you come up with a new idea? How do you think that works? Is it completely spontaneous, or is there something else?
I don't think when it comes to an idea, I think it's very individual based, because people just think differently. For me personally, ideas come very easily. Like I actually, listening to Jay, I've heard of companies like his and what he worked for. I think I could be a perfect person for that type of gig, because ideas are just easy for me. It's easy for me to take something. You could be like, I want to sell fish soda, and already have a marketing plan in my head. I got different flavors, how to do the flavors, like what we're going to do to make those flavors. Like, so for me, ideas are just a snap. They're there. As soon as you give me a kickoff point, or even myself, sometimes I just have a weird dream. As soon as I have a starting point, it's just there. But I feel like that's not true for everybody, so I don't think everybody comes off with a different idea, obviously. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Benjamin, I can't see your face, so I'm going to have to guess. Let's go. There it is. Okay. No, I was going to say, yeah, I'm kind of the same way, Rodney. You can ask Ben and half the other guys we know. It's like, it's just, I don't know. For my brainstorming things, it's not about creating the product, but it's about figuring out what the problem is, what you're trying to solve, and kind of tailoring it in different ways to highlight said person's strengths, not maybe their weaknesses. Like, oh, well, I'm not really good at ideas myself. Well, let's find somebody who can come up with an idea for you. Or, oh, I'm just crap with money. I can't. It's in my hand. Poof, it catches on fire. It's gone. It's about trying to find the end goal in the ideas. Yeah, it's great sitting back, throwing back a couple beers and coming up with these beautiful visions of the future. And you're like, hey, wouldn't it be great? And then you're like, yeah, but there's a lot between A and B. So let's just keep thinking.
Yeah, that's actually, you kind of touched on it, Larry. But yeah, I think maybe ideas are easy, but the challenge is the execution.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, everybody has an idea. Not everyone knows how to take their idea and turn it into something that matters.
And that's the hardest part.
For me, my ideas are, I was trying to come up with the right word for it, and I think the right word is environmental. My ideas come to me because it's a product of the circumstances or the people or the things that are happening around me. So, I have a leather crafting business, right? How do I come up with new ideas for leather crafts? Well, I have other friends that are leather crafters, and then I follow some stuff online, and then just shopping leather online to supply my business. Then, of course, advertisements keep popping up with other people's leather crafts, and I'll see something, and I'll go, that's an interesting idea, but I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this way. And then I start thinking about how I would do it, and try to come up with my own way of creating something either similar, or sometimes when I start going down that path, it takes me in a completely different direction, and I make something that was not even related to the first thing I saw. But that's just part of the natural evolution.
I've seen that firsthand. Or you'll just be like, no, I hear what you're saying. Stop talking. I've got the idea in my head. Shh. Listen.
But it's like I kept seeing advertisements, and this is going to branch into another subject that I know Jay will be on top of as far as like how it relates to brainstorming. But I was looking at dice cases for tabletop RPG people, and a lot of them were made out of wood or plastic, and they're hard cases, and leather ones are usually soft bags, just a bag that you put all your dice in, and bags are dime a dozen. They're all over the place. Going to gaming convention and Comic-Cons, that is the style that you see. And I kept looking at these dice cases and wondering, how can I make something like that, but out of leather, and make it like where people would look at it and go, ooh, that's interesting. Oh, that's different. So as soon as I decided that I wanted to make some version of it, I pulled pictures from every website I could of all the different ways that people have already made ways of holding dice. And there was this one maker, and I don't know if anybody else has seen this, but they make it where the dice go in like a little plastic or glass test tube looking thing, and then it has a leather case, and they call it like the alchemist dice thing or whatever. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool, but I don't want to mess with getting a bunch of test tube flasks. I don't want to do that. So I set to designing a vertical way of stacking your dice inside of like a leather tube that you could clip to your backpack or to your belt or whatever. And after a few iterations, I was able to put something out there and accomplish that idea. But where it started was, I like dice holders, but I don't want to do the one that everybody else does. So I'm going to try and come up with some way of me doing it the way that I want to do it. And I think that's where a lot of my brainstorming happens, is seeing something and just wanting to do it my way.
I think you make it a challenge for yourself, really. In that retrospect, you're like, well, I've come up with the idea like the mad scientist I am, but can I create it? So I kind of feel like you challenge yourself.
What about you, Jay? Yeah. What about you, Jay? Where do your ideas come from?
I really feel like there's so many different ways when I'm working solo, or as a writer or a game designer, as I have been in the past, and that's my connection with Ben, is we've actually brainstormed together on game ideas. So we've probably seen this a little firsthand. But when I'm working solo, it's a lot of what you guys are describing, right? It's I have these ideas, I have a jumping off point, kind of a sparking point, and then from there we follow that where it goes, and maybe there's a left turn, and maybe there's, a zig and a zag, and you environmental things and whatever. What I'm finding though is as I work more in groups and as you work with these business people, it's not my job to be the vanguard of that brainstorming session. My job is to be the quartermaster of that brain session and support their expedition. My job is to kind of encourage their brainstorming and stoke that fire, but not be the one who go. Because if I go off in a direction, even if they and I come to a great idea, then where are they in that? Where's their idea, and how are it's their business? And so for me, it's a really careful kind of consideration, because I'm much like Rodney, much like Larry, much like Ben. Like, I go fast. My brain, when the wheels are spinning, I go super fast, and I really have to bring it down. And this is where I've kind of tried to work on. Let's look at what this process, how it iterates through a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute session, and let's see what those stages feel like, so that I can be more aware of my client. And if clients, for some reason, if it's a group, I have several family businesses and things. And like I said, if I go fast, then all of a sudden I turn around and they're just staring at me like, what just happened? Like, where did you go? How did we get here? Whereas it's their business, and there's a really important kind of intent that you have to get to, where you say, okay, I'm assisting in this process.
I totally get what you mean. Teaching at the university and trying to get students who are in architecture or interior design to build something in the wood shop that I run. I get some of those same feelings where I don't want to tell them what the design should be. I want to support them coming up with their own idea. And but sometimes there's only so many ways to build a thing. If they present an idea, there's only so many ways to build that. And so sometimes I find myself laying out options like, well, you could do this or you could do this. And those are common ways of doing it. And some students take that and go, okay, and then they think about it and they say, I thought about what you said, but I think I want to try this, and they let that evolve. And then sometimes students will go, I really like your idea, I'm just going to do that. Do you run into that a lot, where you say something about a person's business or an idea comes out and then they're like, oh yeah, we'll just do that? Do you ever feel like I feel a little bit bad about doing that, because I feel like I'm taking something away from the student and their process of learning and becoming a designer,
like you're shortchanging
by
them?
feeding them something that like shortchanging them, like it's they're not getting the full experience because I spouted off an idea and they just latched onto it so hard, whenever I was just kind of trying to do well, this is one way to do it, and they're like, yeah, that I'm doing that because that's a good idea. Like, do you run into that? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's tough, and I mean that's where the these aren't one-offs. It's not like you meet someone at a bar and you're sharing a beer and you're dreaming up some business for fun and whatever. It's a relationship that you're building with these people, and so you're having monthly meetings. You're seeing them in the co-working space. You're seeing the emails that they send out or their social media presence, and so you're building a relationship with them. And sometimes there's clients where you just say, okay, I'm going to have to kind of, like you said, lay out a menu of a couple items, and but they're all going to be next step that help advance their business. But I'm just going to have to lay out a few items, and that's where we're going to go with this, and that's how we're going to make this work. And they're going to find one of those that feels good to them, because they're not in a headspace where they're brainstorming and they're not spinning those wheels, and they're just so focused on the nuts and the bolts and the profit and the loss, the black ink, the red ink, those kinds of things. So, but then there's other clients where the menu is to tie them back down, right? The menu is because they're off going as fast as I want to go. And it's the way I break for me and say, okay, let's go back to just the first couple items and let's talk about these. And then let's take some next, and so there's just different ways, but it's that relationship building and knowing your client and knowing kind of where they're at, what they need, and what helps them move into that next step. But it does really stink to have to slow down the creative process. I don't like that at all.
Rodney, where's your head at on this?
I mean, it's kind of like you're kind of nailing it. It's all pretty straightforward to me. It makes sense. I can see how people come in both ways with either ideas that are just too big for their own britches or not enough and they need that assistance. So for me, it's interesting, but it's also like, I get it. I get where he's coming from. Yeah, I don't know.
That's okay.
I think it gets exponentially more fascinating as you look at it more as a group dynamic. I think our pandemic world has really brought us down to real small groups, either one-on-ones or very small groups, or even solo, like we talked about, solo brainstorming or creation. But in a previous world, in a previous incarnation of things we did, things like game jams, things like hackathons, where you had a big group of people together, and it wasn't to necessarily find a consensus. It wasn't necessarily to have a single arcing idea that everyone had to conform to, but when you have a big group of people undergoing this process, that's where my fascination just really comes to life. I think watching a larger, 10 to 15 group of people, them brainstorming through something is just, that's where, to me, like I said, that's where I'm fascinated by the idea of, okay, so you start out here and people almost always act the same way in the first 3 to 4 to 5 minutes of this process. And then the next 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, there's definitely a slowdown. And then, and people start to kind of backtrack or maybe wonder about, and then and that's where the Bloom's taxonomy thing comes in, and you really see how that group process becomes, to me, again, just fascinating, watching people work together sort of in that way with something as nebulous as creativity and brainstorming.
That kind of branches into a question that I've been thinking about for brainstorming, somewhat because of my own experiences in the past for brainstorming, because I like you, and I think like most of us here, we've had varied experiences from trying to brainstorm by ourselves to having like one partner that we brainstorm with to having a large group of people working on something all at the same time. So my question was going to be, are two brains always better than one? And how many brains is too many brains? Is there a limit, and what do you feel like that limit is? And are there pros and cons between kind of going at something by yourself versus having one person as like a sounding board, which my game design partner David, like, he always calls himself the sounding board because it's we just kind of bounce things back and forth, versus having that larger group setting where just anything happens and there's just so many ideas getting thrown at the wall. Like, what are some of the differences there, and which is there a limit, and what would that limit be?
I mean, I think, not to get all too highfalutin, but I mean, anthropologically, we operated as humans in groups of about 12 to 15 people, anthropologically going back into the history of mankind. And I think that's probably the limit. I think you get above that and all of a sudden things kind of break down, unless, you have things like Robert's Rules of Order or things like that but then that's stifling creativity. That's just to keep order. You spend more of your brain cycles, worrying about whose turn it is to speak and how than, the actual ideas being produced. So I think there is an upper limit. But if you got a whole bunch of people that had worked together a lot, you could probably push that limit a little bit. But to be fair, I think much like mirrors, like you said, a sounding board, but like with mirrors, it takes two mirrors to make like the infinity loop. Two parallel mirrors makes your infinity loop. And I think that is really when two people's brains are in sync, that's really where it is. My game design partner Cooper, we were the same way. The best thing we ever had, that Cooper and I ever had, was our friend Evan. Evan's job was every 10 to 15 minutes he would just lean in and say, "But how do you win?" And we'd go, "Gah! Dang it, like we were on this roll, we were going in this crazy place, but you made us realize that it's not a viable game idea. We were just like spitballing and doing crazy brainstorming stuff, and so okay, we'll come back and work on games again, blah blah blah." But having Evan would step in between our two mirrors once in a while was the best thing we ever had, because he was our pullback on just going crazy. So yeah, no, I think 2 is probably your best number. No one gangs up on anyone. There's no voting power play at that point, and it works.
See, Jay, I kind of disagree with you on this one. So and not to like cause too much controversy, but I would argue 3 is the best, specifically for that voting reason. And just hear me out. I don't mean to come off as like, but like in my head, every time I've worked on a project where it's just 2 people, usually we have really strong points. We work really well together. But there are times where it's like, because we can't come to a resolution and there's no vote because it's 50-50, we hit a wall. But every time I've had 3 people that have equal say in something, if there's ever a conflict, I always feel like it's like, okay, we have 3 people. Then it's like, okay, look, I feel really strongly. You feel really strongly. What's the vote? And while I get like, if say I'm the person who votes, like, but I lose the vote, while I get a little butthurt about it, it doesn't come down to, well, crap, because it's more of like, okay, I have strong opinions about things, but if there are 2 other people that are saying, hey, you're missing something, at least for me, and this could be, I think it could be different for people, so it may not be that one of us is right or wrong, but I think that when I have voice of reason and there's more than just one other voice, I tend to respect it more, because then it's something where I go, okay, maybe I am wrong, maybe there is something I'm missing. That's more of an opinion, but that's just like, I'm like, I really like 3s when it comes to making decisions and stuff.
Rodney, it's very, very valid. I mean, I think you're right on with that. And I think again, and I guess maybe it also depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get to a point, if you're trying to get to kind of you have a place you're trying to get to, but you're trying to come up with creative ways to get there, I think maybe the 3 is the way to go, because you don't want to ever get bogged down. You don't want to hit that wall. But if you just start in the middle of the whiteboard and you don't have a destination, in my mind, that's where 2 really shines, because you can just go off and go that way. So I think both ways have their uses and their spots where they shine.
Yeah, I respect that. That I feel like that's a better way to say it. Yes, very much so.
Larry, where's your head at on this?
Well, I was just sitting there. I had the idea originally when we got to the beginning of this conversation. I was like, it's kind of one of those things where I see why some people, it's something you said, Ben, why some people just can't come up with the idea. They can't, pop out stuff like, they could be one of the, like I said, the most creative people but they're just sitting there and they're stuck. And I kind of feel like, honestly, it's just because you have a passion for whatever you're trying to do. And so when some people get so passionate or just so into it, they kind of just are so one-site directed. They're just like, this is dangerous for me to, do alone. For me, who's already like invested, I'm ride or die. And so for them to be like, I'm going to go to Jay because I don't know what in the heck I want to do. Well, I know what I want to do, but I don't know what I want, and it becomes this perpetual just rolling down the hill. And it was just like, it's kind of one of those things where I kind of feel like, if you have a third person, they can keep you on the straight and narrow. You keep that one cynical friend, that's like, well, would that really work? I mean, if I wanted it to go wrong, it would go wrong this way. And you're like, oh, I had not thought of that. It's like,
yep.
kind of keeping you grounded in reality, keep you from getting too far into the clouds in your little mirror infinity loop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting when you think about the group. I'm like, Jay, I'm extremely interested. I wish I could just be a fly on a wall at like your work and stuff, because that watching people develop is definitely something that very much so interests me. I've started several groups and organizations, and even now have one that like I run, and the group dynamic is something it gets very complicated. It's very messy at times. And trying to understand people and watching how different people work and all these things. There's a lot of elements that go into play into it that, like, while I've had limited experience with it, I would love to see it more from just like an outside perspective. I don't know. Like, I don't know where I'm getting with that. I just think it's interesting.
I went down that hallway. I don't know where I was trying to exit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't know that I was trying to exit. I was just there.
You're just looking up.
I'm just
looking
hanging
around.
out. Like,
where's this gone?
I like these paintings. Like,
God, who lives here? This is nice. This is nice.
Is that French architecture?
They have a Van Gogh. This is a good place. I don't know if we should be here.
Oh man.
I mean, the ooh shiny is a thing, right? I mean, you, and again, it goes back to interest level, and I think you look at, what do people bring to the table, right? Like, I don't know, Larry at all, as far as I'm aware. Like, I don't think we've ever crossed paths. I think
Possibly.
Rodney, I think you and I have maybe met in around Ben maybe once or twice. And I know Ben pretty well, but just the guess from our conversation, I could probably come up with a pretty solid guess on, reading levels, comprehension, education, interest, things like that to go back into. And I think it's interesting to find, where do people come from and how do they get to these places, and again, that's part of that relationship building, but then seeing how that interacts with their creativity and their problem solving and how they go about those kinds of things. Like you said, being that fly on the wall and listening, it would be one of those things you'd have to be a fly on the wall, I think, several times to be, to really get a full picture of how that would work.
Very cool. What are you laughing
Sorry,
at,
it was
Larry?
just Ben coming back with, and very cool. All right, here we are on NPR.
And next on Amusing Minds, we have Jake Sparks. He's going to be talking about some brainstorming, and so stay tuned for that.
It's great to have you here today, Jay. Great to have you with us in the studio.
I don't have enough letters after my name to be on NPR, so.
Jay Sparks, Esquire Jr. the Third.
This is the episode where we ragged on NPR for nothing in particular.
Why didn't your podcast make it, guys? Well, we had an episode where we just talked crap on NPR for like 30 minutes.
And suddenly our 3 fans didn't want to listen to us anymore.
They wrote into Dear Abby. Yeah.
And Abby shut us down.
Cancel culture. Here you go.
Oh God. Let's not get into that. All right.
Moving on.
And moving on. And now for something completely different. I had been wanting to ask you, Jay. We've been talking about brainstorming just sort of as an abstract concept, as just sort of, where you're thinking through ideas. You have different group sizes of kind of bouncing ideas around and just sort of letting it evolve through a natural process. But what are some of your favorite ways to document a brainstorming session? How do you take notes? What kind of notes should you take? Should you, or do you just like record sessions so that you can review them later? Like what are some of the best ways for you to kind of keep track of how things evolved or how to move forward from it?
Well, this is definitely going to be an individual taste. Your mileage may vary kind of thing. For me, in particular, I live on whiteboards. There is nothing more like visually stimulating to me than holding one of those dry erase markers and clicking the cap and with a blank whiteboard behind me. I just there's just nothing quite like it for me. In fact, when I got this job, like I said, it was my first desk, it was my first office. I'm in my mid 40s. I've never had it before, and they came to me and they were like, "What do you need for office supplies? Do you need anything?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I've never done this before. Like, what? Like, do I need manila folders? Like, I don't know what I need." And they were like, "Well, just anything for your office." And I was like, "Wait, how much are whiteboards? Like the big ones that hang on the wall?" And they were like, "They're not that expensive." And I'm like, "I need 2 whiteboards over here. I need the big whiteboard calendar that's all 365 days over here." Like, and they were just like, "Okay." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." So my office is like fully whiteboarded out, and I am up at the whiteboard. It's like win, lose, or draw with me and my clients more often than not, because I'm up there trying to be like, "No, but see then, and then an arrow goes over here, and then we're gonna link to this." And
It's
like,
a beautiful
and I
line.
think half the time the clients leave. Yeah, and I think half the time the clients leave and they're just like, "Okay, this guy's crazy. Like, this guy's really messed up because he just like made some sort of weird graffiti art and told me it was my business plan." But yeah, I'm a whiteboard person through and through. I think it captures the energy. It's malleable. I think sometimes with the recording, even you go back and you get hung up on what was said and what was decided and where you went. But for some reason, the picture at the end of a whiteboard captures the energy of that so much better. In my opinion, your mileage may completely vary.
Jay, at my work, we have a wall that is painted in a whiteboard paint. So it's the entire wall. I think for Christmas, we need to get together and get you some of that paint so you can just paint your whole wall. Because then it's just the whole wall. Everything's available.
Right. I just be like, "Excuse me, can you move your chair? I'm writing here. I'm brainstorming.
And
Move your chair."
don't tell them that the wall's a whiteboard. They don't know that it's like erasable, so you're just writing on the corners.
It's all
laying on the floor,
awesome.
writing sideways, like near the floor, just to fill every gap in space. I will say
like
that paint is a bitch to work with. I actually had to paint an 8-foot by 21-foot wall at the university for one of the design studios for architecture because they wanted a whiteboard wall, and they bought that paint, and they also bought the primer that's got the iron bits in it, so it's magnetic too.
Ooh, nice.
And oh my gosh, it took like a week to paint it because you have to go through like 4 different stages of painting on the thing, but it worked. It was amazing, and it's huge, and it covers an entire 20-foot wall at an architectural studio. But I would not recommend using that paint because it is, oh my gosh.
Well, you have somebody else paint it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Pay someone to paint it. Do not try it yourself.
This apparently is the not safe for work portion of the show for me. thinking about whiteboard painting an entire room. This is not safe for work for me.
Oh man.
I actually live on Google Docs. Google Docs is like my bread and butter. I use a whiteboard at university whenever I'm trying to explain like how to build things to students, because drawing things out visually and doing very quick sketches of like how wood joins together and things like that is much easier. But when it comes to getting ideas down, I'm getting it down literally on virtual paper. I've tried doing like the cloud thing where you draw the arrows and have like the bubbles and stuff, and it never really cemented for me. But if I make one of those super bland, so dry outlines with the A, B, 1, 2, 3 bullet points thing, it totally makes sense to me, and I love that flow of information as vanilla as that is in the ideal world. It just works for me, and it makes everything like feel so much clearer to me. And I think that's part of my documentation process is always clarification, making sure that it looks clear on paper, then it's clear in my head. And the bubbles and clouds and like, you know, kind of the mess of ideas thing always feels like a mess in my head. Like I don't know what the flow is in that, because it's just kind of going everywhere. But the flow on an outline is one direction, and that just makes so much more sense to me.
Ben just
Where are you at?
Ben just poured his soul out. I want you to all just acknowledge what Ben just did there. He was laying himself on the line for you. Embrace the outlines. No, for me it's chaos. I'm pretty sure that I'm just a monster to any ideas, really, because I'm like, oh no, I can't let you see the light of day. You know, you're not meant for this world. So like, if it's really good, I'll take like a screenshot, or I'll send myself a little note just to kind of be like, hey, maybe this will put you on the trail if you're really interested in this idea. And so like, you can go through my internet tab on my phone and be like, oh geez, okay, you've got 58 tabs open. Why? It's like, one of these days, scroll down 13, that one, I'm gonna use that one of these days.
Huh. So it's kind of funny because I'm a mix of both of those. Except I don't use Google Docs, I use Trello.
Oh, yeah.
I use Trello to be organized, and I do use Google Docs some. I can't say that I don't. That's probably because of Ben more so.
Mm-hmm.
But like, so I Google Docs, but then on my phone and like in random places, I have like these notepads. Like, hold on, I want to look just because I haven't looked. Like, I'll make these notes in my phone, and it's just a massive list of like random ideas, and then I got like reminders set for stuff. And I'm like, what? I send myself messages on Facebook all the time.
I used to do that a lot.
Yeah, it's a mess. But then the projects I'm actively working on, I have like Trello boards where it's like, okay, where's this at? Where's the stage of this? Where's this? And like, I go in there and I move the cards, and then like on some of the games that I'm working on, it's very heavy text based. I build the documents on Google Docs. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I was.
I think the last time Ben and I worked together on a project was during our pandemic game jam. We were both tabletop judges, and so we were working on our own thing during that time. And we had a late night on phone / Google Docs banging through things, and I think I was probably messier than Ben was. And I think that probably caused whatever inaction we weren't able to accomplish was probably because of my mess. So
no, actually I thought that was pretty cool. That was one of the first times I convinced someone to be on Google Docs at the same time as me and actually typed things into the window. There's plenty of times where like I have other people looking at the Google Docs with me, but I'm usually the one that's like furiously typing and like taking notes on what we're talking about. But you were the first time where I actually started seeing like other things pop up at the same time, and I was like, ooh, this is really cool. Okay, yeah, let's keep going with this. Like, ooh, interaction, yes, please, more.
Larry, we're gonna have to spend a day where we just, Google Docs with Ben.
Yeah,
where we're just on there.
Yeah, just constantly typing.
That would make me so happy,
things.
guys.
Ben just needs the documented creativity process.
You're thinking of me that way.
Here's the project already, Ben. Me, you, and Larry are gonna write a script to a movie we're never gonna make.
Oh, fuck.
And that's gonna be our Google Doc project.
Stop. That's too true to home for me. Okay, I did that with Dustin once. That's too true to home.
But no, we go into it with the mentality that we will never be able to make this movie.
But then you film it, and then you don't do anything with it. That's what...
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I know all about that. There's projects I've been in with Ben that I still haven't seen footage of because it just isn't going to happen.
Hey, those are not my fault. Those were not my projects.
I'm not blaming you,
those were
Ben.
directed by not me. I did not direct those.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying you were involved in that project so you can recognize the pain.
Okay. I was involved.
I am aware.
I'm
aware of why it didn't happen. Oh, man.
Wow. Okay, so brainstorming. Brainstorming's a thing. We are getting close to the end of our time, or the end of time, something like that. Anyway, so Jay, what kind of advice would you give someone that wants to come up with the next best idea, a script, an art piece, music, an invention, a game, doesn't matter what it is. But if somebody if somebody asked you for advice on how they come up with the next best thing, what is it that you would tell them?
Thing I think I would tell someone in that case, and like I said, again, I tell my clients this in business a lot, immerse yourself in what you're doing first. If you want to write a script, read scripts. Maybe you don't have to read how to write a script book, but read some scripts. Like don't just watch the movie, but read the script. If you're working on an art piece, browse the art with some hashtags that make sense and immerse yourself for a while, because I think your brain, like we said, environmental, right? And the connecting to connecting mentality. So if you don't have that starting point, it's really hard to get to the next step or the next step. And so by immersing yourself in whatever it is you're working on or interested in, I think it provides that fertile ground. It's like doing all the right things. It's tilling the soil, it's putting the water, it's putting the fertilizer down, it's doing all the things right for whatever to grow, by immersing yourself in that. And then from there, again, find a way that works for you. And it doesn't have to be the whiteboard. It doesn't have to be Google Docs. It doesn't have to be phone notes. It can literally be whatever's working for you. It can literally be Post-it notes on your bathroom mirror, whatever it takes. But once you've immersed yourself and you've started that process of feeling out what works for you, it's going to start. The process sometimes you can't stop it. But I think if you start that way, that's your first step.
Great advice from Jay Sparks on brainstorming and getting your next best idea started. Jay, is there somewhere that people can find you online? Can they follow you, get more of your content, or maybe message you for some advice? Where can they find you? What are you working on? The floor is yours.
My Twitter is probably my most forward facing thing, and it's a train wreck. So it's at SparksJ, SP as in Paul, ARKSJAY. You're welcome to observe the train wreck. A lot of people are into that kind of thing, so feel free. There's a lot of niche sports and art and role playing things on there. So who knows? What am I working on? Gosh, what am I not working on? Game ideas, script ideas, art pieces. I'm doing a sketchbook right now for the Columbia Art League for their March exhibit. I picked one of those up, and everybody who did it works through a sketchbook over the course of a month and then turns the sketchbooks back in. So I'm doing, what am I doing? I'm doing plants without doing any research. So I'm doing like botanical detail drawings, but I'm doing no research or actually looking at plants, and I know nothing about it. So I'm just making up plants for a month in visual graphic detail, and I don't know. So that'll be at the Columbia Art League next month, I think, middle of next month. So just any and all liberal arts things, film, audio, radio, video, visuals, everything I'm into and I'm working on, and I'm always down to talk about more. And obviously, if you're local to the Mid-Missouri area and you would like to talk about business from that standpoint, entrepreneurship, I'm always super down to talk about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Jay. We really appreciate you coming on the show and giving us some insight into brainstorming and getting your ideas out there and starting to let those form into something that you can do with it. We're going to take a break right now, and after this, we'll be back with more podcasts. Stick around. And welcome back. That was a really interesting conversation with Jay. That I know that we covered so much stuff about brainstorming and how to get an idea out there. We went from identifying some conventional wisdoms to looking at brainstorming as a system of education and allowing the idea to sort of be taught and evolve. Coming up with new ideas as a product of environment or a product of just your nature by nature. You just have ideas all the time, and group dynamics versus mirroring versus 3 being our magic number. And basically I do agree 3 was definitely the magic number. I think I have to agree with Rodney on that. Having 2 people is great because you can move really quickly, but having that third person not only makes things more democratic between the 3 people, but also allows, like what Larry was saying, it allows that skepticism to come in and keep things grounded, keep things real, and go, well, but what about, have you thought about this or that? And Jay also reflected that same thing when designing a game, and you have that third person go, yeah, but how do you win? Because that third person can identify what's missing when 2 people get in really heavy into an idea and just miss something. Though apparently there is a limit to the number of people. About 12 to 15 people seems to be a limit, and I'm going to have to agree with that too. I didn't get to say it during our interview, but in the past, having a single partner to work back and forth with, things do happen really fast, but we tend to miss things. A trio has worked really well for me, but then when it gets to like anywhere above 5 people, for me, for some reason, anywhere above 5 people, especially if all 5 of those people have a different vision for what the idea is, what the goal of the idea is, it tends to make things muddy. This especially happened for me during filmmaking processes. When doing film contests and trying to make a movie in a weekend for a contest, I felt like there was a singular vision, but then me being a natural people pleaser, because I mean, that's totally not a thing, right, guys? I'm not a people pleaser. That's never happens. I'm so a people pleaser.
God.
But when that happens, and there's so many people throwing out ideas, and I want to give voice to every idea, that the vision becomes blurry, and I lose focus on style, and I lose focus on the content at hand that did make it interesting. And those were big learning experiences for me as far as brainstorming and how that can work in a group dynamic, for sure. And then we talked about documenting brainstorming sessions, from Google Docs to Trello, to physical whiteboard in front of you. From digital to physical, it's all over the place, and it all boils down to personal preference and how does your thought process work. And then Jay ended it with some really great advice for anyone that wants to start a new idea. Crap, I forgot what he said. That's terrible. Could you guys help me?
Apparently, it wasn't that great of advice.
No, it
Huh?
was.
It
It was.
Really,
It was.
I'm just bullshitting at this moment.
I was totally bullshitting because I'm just trying to get through this. Could you guys help me out here?
Well, I was gonna say.
What did he say? What did he say?
I think our listeners, the advice wasn't just a one-piece advice. It was kind of on all things. If you're going to try to create an idea, a concept, or build something, get started. Actually, just start working on it.
Oh, that's what it was. Is just take a step one, right?
There was a lot of information he imparted on us, but I think the key factor was, if you're going to start something, start it.
Yep.
Fail. It's okay to fail, because you learn more from failure than you do from success. And fail faster. It's funny because it's a game ideology, but he was even talking about it in different contexts. So it's for games, it's for businesses, for anything creative. You really have to allow yourself to fail, or really allow yourself to have the creative process. Go through and just do the thing that you want to do. Embrace everything that is the thing you want to do. Like he did leave... towards the end, he talked about, if you want to write a book, read books. If you want to write a script, read a script. If you want to draw a picture, look at art. Like, take the thing that you want to create and immerse yourself into that thing. And I really think that that's what we need to take away from the entirety of the talk, the podcast, the show, is if you want to do something, in the great words of Shia LaBeouf, just do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, I think that we really have to take into consideration as individuals, especially us, but also our listeners, if you're being creative, allow yourself to be creative. If you find yourself stuck, maybe just allow yourself to try some things, do some things, and see where it takes you. And if in the case that you're trying to start a business or do things where you just can't get yourself off the block or get yourself going, there's people like Jay who help and assist with that. So I think that was really cool.
So literally, this is simple as can be. Simple. If you have an idea, tell people about it. If they like it, something might happen from it. But you'll never know what people think of your idea until you tell them your idea. Bam, mic drop.
So you're saying find that sounding board, seek feedback.
Yes, and like he was saying, don't find somebody whose ideas are absolutely parallel to yours. You know, have a little bit of chaos introduced, not in that crazy Joker Batman way, but, you know, just have somebody there who's kind of there to be a naysayer, not like a, you know, cutting you down to size, but somebody who's like, well, I don't know about that one. Have you thought that one through?
There is a good kind of conflict with brainstorming ideas, and there should be some conflict, but in a positive, constructive way.
Yes.
Right.
You know, I've learned what I've learned out of just after having Jay on with the talk and just in general about brainstorming is we have to separate ourselves from our ideas. Because when we have a conflict of ideas or we're just trying to allow it to evolve, we can't allow ourselves to be so attached to the idea that we are the ones being attacked or feel like we're being attacked. I guess I should say that it's okay for a constructive form of criticism to come into a brainstorming session, and one thing that Jay said, you know, that there are no bad ideas is a conventional wisdom, and I think that there could be some debate around that, but in all honesty, if there's an idea that challenges one that you've already had, we definitely shouldn't personally. We should allow, like Larry said, we should allow that chaos to come in, that conflict to come in, and evolve the idea into something even better than it was. And if you want to defend your idea, defend it defend the idea. Don't defend yourself.
There's something I also want to impart because I don't want it to get missed. We keep talking about sharing the ideas, talking about the ideas, bouncing it off of people, but something Jay touched on and that everyone needs to keep in mind, it's not enough just to have the idea. You have to take action on the idea. And even if you're using a bouncing board and you have someone that's being a naysayer, sometimes it's more effective to go, okay, I even hear you, but let's try it. Let's fail together and see what happens, because you cannot make something great if you don't make anything at all.
Yeah, I tell the same thing to anybody that asks me for advice is the first dozen things that you make are going to suck until you make something that's good. And another one of my favorite sayings is failure is the path to success. And that overcoming those failures separates those that can succeed from those that will give up before they can succeed. Because we can never expect to succeed on the first try. Though those are some of my favorites. What do you think, Larry?
Well, it's okay to sometimes let an idea die so that another one can take its place, you know. You can go through a whole idea for 9 months to a year and then you realize, you know, that was kind of wasted. We really didn't accomplish anything. Well, you know what? Let's move on to a new idea. Take it from there. Never stop.
Or maybe it's not
trying.
Wasted.
Well, true.
Maybe it's not wasted. Maybe it's that you needed the experience and that you learned something from it, even though it didn't, you know, pan out. I struggle.
A lesson is never wasted. If you learn something from it, it's not wasted.
But I do get where you're coming from, Larry. I struggle all the time with, did I waste my time doing this? I just had an Etsy request come through, and they wanted a wallet that fits on the back of their phone. And I went through the entire process of designing it for an iPhone and making the templates and everything. And then there was a disagreement on price, and they walked away. And I didn't charge for my design time. I lost that time. And I struggled with the idea that I wasted my time, you know, working with this person to just have them say, no, you're too expensive, and then walk away. Or I could see it as, well, now I know how to make a wallet for that size phone, or I have a template that I can adjust and make that style wallet now if I wanted to for different phones, because I spent the time doing that, and now I've learned how to do that. And so, yeah, my initial reaction is, man, I wasted my time. But when I allow that thought to pass, then I go, but I did learn something, didn't I? And then that's where the value is.
As long as you learn something, you're not wasting time. If you can apply that knowledge moving forward.
But you know how...
Man, we got real serious there for a minute.
But you know how people get self-deprecating sometimes. And so that's why they say, oh, I've wasted all this time. But this is, again, thinking from a cool, calm, precise head. Now, you know, sometimes people, like you said, don't have that kind of calm head. Maybe they're too into it. They're too deep. They're too attached. They're too narrow-minded on one thing. You know, it's this kind of things that help bring it back together. Help at least pull the people.
I like that. Okay, I think that brings us... I think that's a good note to end on. Okay, I think that's a really good note to end on with brainstorming and our topic for today. If you enjoyed the podcast and you'd like to subscribe to us and support us online, visit amusingmindspodcast.com, and we have links to all of our socials and our show notes there. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We will catch you next time.